Hi Jessie,
Hi, Mark.
what brings you here today and what got you interested in aerospace?
Well, a few years back, when we lived in America, I toured JPL, which is NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and I thought that was really cool. And then I did a bit more research and I found out it was aerospace engineering, and then I kind of got hooked because I always wanted to be an engineer. Like, you can ask my mum, ever since I was 4, I would use building blocks and create little machines and stuff. And I originally wanted to be a robotics engineer, but then after JPL, I decided aerospace was pretty cool.
And have you heard about the connection with New Zealand and JPL and who used to be the director of JPL?
Yeah.
A guy called Sir William Pickering, he was the first director of Jet Propulsion Laboratories from the 50s through to the 70s, and under his directorship they actually put out those first unmanned missions to the Moon, Venus, Mars,
Oh, that's awesome.
and the outer solar system. So it's pretty exciting that Sir William Pickering, who was actually born in Havelock, the same town that Sir Ernest Rutherford, who split the atom, they were born in the same town, Havelock, and Sir William Pickering went on to be the director of JPL, which is the whole unmanned program for the US.
Huh. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Cool. When and why did you decide to get into the aerospace industry?
Yeah, well, Jesse, for a long time I've always been fascinated by space travel, space technology, grew up with space Lego,
Yeah.
and back then space Lego wasn't as cool as the space Lego you have now. You play with the space Lego?
I play Lego, yeah.
Yeah. Basically grew up with a lot of that stuff, the movies, and but certainly fascinated by the Apollo program and reading lots of books. I read a lot of books about space science and science fiction. So I've always been quite fascinated by space. But then in 2006 I went to the International Space Development Conference in LA, and they were talking about the private space industry that was emerging, and I thought that there must be an opportunity in the Southern Hemisphere, because all that activity was happening in the Northern Hemisphere. I thought there must be some opportunity to get something started in the Southern Hemisphere, and I thought, why can't New Zealand be part of that?
Yeah.
And so then I came back to New Zealand and started looking around for ventures that I could support, and in the end Peter Beck and myself ended up talking to each other and realised that we had a similar vision for starting a space company in New Zealand.
Yeah, that was Rocket Lab.
That was Rocket Lab.
Huh. If you could go back in time to your 12-year-old self, what advice would you give him?
Well, I think do more maths. I was a bit slack on the maths when I was young, and I sort of regret not putting a bit more time into that. And I think also just holding higher standards for yourself. I think there's probably some periods where I just sort of cruised along a little bit, and I didn't try quite as hard as I could in some areas. But overall it's worked out okay. But I think those are probably the two main things.
Cool. Some people say that we shouldn't spend money on aerospace when there are so many problems down on Earth. What do you think about this?
Yeah, well, I can understand the way they think about that. But if we look at some context, for example, the US military puts about $700 billion a year into their military and only $20 billion into NASA.
Yeah.
So if you sort of think the difference between 700 and 20 billion,
Yeah.
and likewise in New Zealand, we never actually had any space budget, whereas we put a lot of money into the military.
Yeah.
So I would argue that why are we putting all this money into building missiles and tanks and armaments and stuff like that? Well, why are we doing that when we could be putting money into learning about the universe that we live in?
Yeah.
I think we're on this Earth. There's only one Earth, and we need to know more about the environment, space, and obviously if we put hardware up into space like satellites and we look down with aerial imagery and communications, it gives us a lot of information about the world that we live in. So I would argue that it's actually crucially important for us to have a more sustainable humanity, a more sustainable future, that we actually really need to invest more into space. I think if we do start doing long durations missions in space, I think we're going to be learning a lot more about communication systems and sustainability, because if you're in a life support system, you have to recycle everything, and a lot of those technologies are going to come back down and be used on Earth, just in the same way that the Apollo program spawned so many technologies around the miniaturization of computers through to different materials.
Yeah. So it actually benefits life on Earth.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Cool. What were the best and worst days of your career?
Yeah, well, I guess there's a lot of days where you're just struggling and things don't go quite right. But I guess one day that stands out for me was when in 2009, when we did our first major rocket launch for Rocket Lab, and in the morning we were meant to launch in about 7 o'clock in the morning, and in the end the fuel line didn't disengage from the rocket. It got frozen to the rocket, and it didn't actually disengage. So we had TV1 and TV3 and all these media there broadcasting live, and when that fuel line didn't disengage, it was kind of a difficult moment, but then Peter Beck and the team managed to sort out the problem, and in the afternoon we did the launch, and that was a fantastic feeling to see that rocket launch up into the sky, and from then it validated the technology that we were working on, and we went on to win contracts with a bunch of people. So started off as a really bad day, ended up as a really fantastic day.
Yeah. When people think of aerospace engineering, they often think of maths and physics, but what role do you think creativity has in it?
I think a lot of what startups and aerospace projects, a lot of it comes down to creativity and problem solving. So you actually need to have some really good methodologies on how to actually solve really tricky problems. So I think creativity is definitely a crucial part to that.
Yeah. And why do you think Christchurch or Canterbury is a good place for an aerospace hub?
Well, we've got open skies and variable terrain. We're the second largest manufacturing hub in New Zealand. We've actually got a bunch of aerospace companies doing interesting work here already. We've got a pretty supportive local government. We're the first city to actually have a Christchurch space strategy or a sector plan. So we definitely want to see Christchurch as a major hub for aerospace in the future.
And in 2018, you started up Kia Aerospace. What's your ultimate goal with this venture?
Yeah, well, the two main objectives was firstly to help build the aerospace ecosystem, and so we were integral in starting up Aerospace Christchurch and getting the people networking and developing events and developing that strategy for the city. The second main goal is to start commercial projects, and so we've actually got a commercial project underway developing a high altitude unmanned aircraft. Basically we're looking forward to developing a whole bunch of aerospace projects in Christchurch, and it's going to be an exciting couple of years coming up, Jesse.
You're also the first New Zealander to purchase a ticket on Virgin Galactic's suborbital flight. Why did you decide to do this?
Yeah, well, that was around about 2006, and I thought it would be fantastic to support the space industry. In the same way, around about the same time I bought a Toyota Prius to support the hybrid technologies, and now I've got a Tesla to support the electric technologies in the automotive industry. I think it's really crucial for us to get to more sustainable sources of transportation, and likewise I think it's really crucial for people to invest in these aerospace companies and support them so that they can make a difference in the world. I think Virgin Galactic are going to be doing some interesting things with technology, and it's a small stepping stone to making space more accessible. I think it's just a really great company to support, and of course it'll be a fantastic experience.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for talking.
Yeah, great talking to you, Jesse.
Nice.
Nice
Thank
one.
you.
Cheers.